Welcome to SMSF Mate, our general advice warning. We are required to warn you that any advice has been prepared without taking into account your objectives, financial situations or needs. And because of that, you should, before acting on any advice, consider the appropriateness of the advice, having regard to your own objectives, financial services and needs. Where the advice relates to the acquisition or possible acquisition of a particular financial product, you should obtain a product disclosure statement relating to that product and consider the PDS before making any decision about whether to acquire the product.
Like the whole point of this whole business is a couple of mates sharing stories. So I reckon I'll try and say that. How's your editing going? Welcome back to SMSF Mate's daily podcast. My name's Gareth. Joined with me is Ashwin.
And this podcast is about a bunch of mates talking about super in general and having ideas and shooting it around and seeing what comes out of our conversations.
So let's get into it.
All right. So if someone came to you and asked, how much super do you need for retirement? How would you best answer that one?
Millions and millions and millions.
I always start with looking at what I need in retirement on a living cost basis. So, you know, the accountant in me crunches numbers and goes, Jody and I and the kids will hopefully be out of home in retirement, but Jody and I would need probably close to 150 grand a year in retirement. And how are we going to get that balance? So basically, it's more of an income question than how much do you need. It's how much do you spend. That's the way I generally look at it.
I think that's a really good point. It comes down to how much you actually spend and what sort of lifestyle you want.
Yeah, because the number's different for everyone. Some people can live off the age pension. I probably couldn't.
Yeah, if you're into camping and caravanning, there's a pretty low, well, there used to be before the increase in price on caravans came along. Yeah, but, you know, now you need your 200 grand Land Cruiser.
Yeah.
Camping can get really expensive really quickly.
I suppose the only thing I generally would look at is it's easier to answer that or plan for it when you know what that spending habit is. So, you know, the way you look at it is let's say you've got a 40-year window to put money into super, you know, from your 20s to 65 or 60s. The earlier you identify how much you need, the quicker you could get to that goal because it's got more time in your super to make earnings for you. The problem sometimes is if I waited till I was 50 and wait till the kids are out of home, I've only got 15 years to make that money work for me. If I do that hard yards earlier, it's less work needed in the end. So that's probably the way I look at it. I'm not sure.
I think there's also like a best case and worst case scenario with it. You know, best case scenario, you go to school, you leave school when you're 18, you do your uni, you meet your childhood sweetheart, you get married when you're 25, you pop out a couple of kids, you live happily ever after, have your 50th, you know, diamond wedding anniversary, then you die and, you know, your life's finished. You know,
Yeah.
That's probably your best case spending scenario. Worst case, far more realistic case, is you go to uni, you start one degree, you work out it's not for you, you then have a couple of crazy marriages and you end up getting divorced, and then there'll be a kid or two thrown in there and some child support. Then you'll probably lose a job. You may have a COVID situation where the economy just dies, or you have a global financial crisis thrown in there somewhere. Then, you know, your third cousin or your family member, you know, then doesn't have any money, so you end up bailing them out as well. And then house prices go down the toilet, and then all of a sudden you're at 55, and what you thought when you were 20 was I need $1 million, and you actually need 2. That's worst case.
That's quite a few cases there. I suppose, and I suppose the easiest way to do it is if you sort of stay on top of it in some extent. So obviously you can't control family changes and things of that nature, but simplistic view I always had was I need a house to live in, I need a house for the kids and my wife and myself.
Define house. How many bedrooms? How many floors?
Those things change, and the key part for me was always having enough outside of super that we could afford the next house or the house we needed to move
Yeah.
into. But everything else should go into super. In my mind, it's tax friendly. It's the vehicle that at the moment is tax free in retirement up to your first $1.6 million each, which is plenty. And you can't get that anywhere else. And while you're earning, it's 15%. So as long as you're earning more than 15% tax rates, which is probably more than $30,000, it makes more sense that your money be in super. Now, you still need money for everything else that goes through your life, whether it's divorces or things of that nature. But super is the safest place generally to put your money. But it means keeping an eye on how you invest it and what it's doing and everything like that. And that's where I think a lot of people don't spend any time. And I remember my first super fund. It was worked at Myer, and you filled out the form, and the only question was, are you risky or high risk? And that was perfectly suitable then, but is it suitable now or is it suitable in the future? Do I look at how it was fees or anything like that? So as soon as I started taking care of it, I actually looked at that statement once a year, and it wasn't an unopened envelope that sits on the dining table.
Absolutely.
Like most people sort of do.
I mean, you look at your bank balance every day, look at your credit card. Well, most people look at their credit card probably every couple of days, and then most people look at their mortgage. And then you hear people haven't never looked at their super fund, and they've got $500,000 sitting there, and it's just doing 2% a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
That could have been $1 million if you paid attention 10 years ago.
No, and that's right. That's what's missing all the time. And I think that's the first thing you got to look at. You got to be willing to spend some time on look at your finances, and super's your next biggest investment, or if not bigger than your house or what you've got in your mortgage. So
yeah, some people have got more money in their super fund than they've got in their savings. You know,
but they don't look at it.
They don't look at it.
Yeah, so
that's what we're trying to do with this website of ours, is try and make people think a bit harder.
Yeah, make your own endeavours, engage in your own super, and you should hopefully be a self-funded retiree, because we don't know if the age pension's still going to be there.
No.
When it's our turn. And a few of us will receive inheritances over our lifetime. And you probably need to be wise about how you use that money and where it should go, and not just maybe put it in your mortgage.
And maybe even having the conversation with those people you may be inheriting it from, so that they can set their structures up properly. I think people kind of get this surprise check when their relatives pass away, and then they go buy new Ferraris.
Yeah.
There's probably better ways.
It's that live now mentality, and just putting a little bit extra in super will let you live better when it comes to no more working. But people don't do that.
It's interesting because a lot of people don't seem to have a budget, or they just spend what they've got. So I think for the first part is you have to actually work out how much you actually spend in the first instance. I'm a bit of a budget nerd, so I know how much we spend, and I know how much we earn, and I know what's left. But I think if I was to take a poll from my primary sphere of contacts, being mates, business partners, family, I would say most of them just live on what money they've got in the bank. So I think the first exercise is go and look at the last 3 years. How much did you make? How much have you got left? Divide that by whatever 3 years times 52 weeks is. That's how much you need per week. And I think if you did that exercise, you might be quite surprised versus what you might have quickly scribbled out on a pen and paper about a mortgage and so on. I think the second thing you'd want to think about would be your mortgage and whether or not you would have paid your house off by the time you actually retire, because that's going to be the single largest expense. Myself personally, I like going on holidays. I'm not really interested in caravanning or camping around Australia. I want to go to Europe and eat in nice restaurants and so on. So my annual budget for holidays is probably more than your standard person, but that's okay. I don't do sport and don't smoke and don't do drugs and so on and so on. So I'm okay to go get drunk on nice wine in France somewhere. That's my thing. So, in my budget for super and retirement will be, a house, hopefully paid off, but no guarantees. You're going to probably want a new car every 5 or 10 years. Most people do. You might want a boat. You're going to be bored in retirement, so you're probably going to join the golf club or something. I'm not a sit at home, play puzzles kind of guy. So I think you have to think about what you like doing and think what you might like doing when your biggest time consumer i.e. work, is taken away from you, what are you going to do? So, that's got to come into it. Golf isn't cheap. Boating isn't cheap. Grandkids, how many grandkids are you likely to have? Have you got a big family? Christmas presents, this starts adding up pretty quick.
Yeah, Gareth's right in his fairly accounting answer, to be honest. A budget, there's no right or wrong budget, but it's the data that is probably the interesting part. So people don't know or take a holistic view generally on their spending, and when people do fill out a budget, they're just reflecting maybe on the last 30 days or 60 days, and 3 years is great. Now, there are some online solutions and free tools where you can actually plug in your bank history, and it'll actually grab all your transactions, and you just have to code it, and it picks up the normal things like Woolworths' groceries and things like that, and it actually spits out a fairly accurate spending history for an individual. And then you can actually have the conversation like, do I fly to France and have wine? Or if I don't do that every year and I do that every 3 years, I can put that extra money into super and have that conversation if you don't have enough going in there. So we always have to choose things. Everything's an opportunity cost. You can choose to do something now, or you can choose to do it later and have the compound interest or return or the upside of it. But
compromise is a good word.
Compromise, yeah. That get that word used a lot in our household.
Likewise,
yeah. So, that's the nature.
Life. Yeah,
that's exactly life. It. And but it's just having those conversations. And I think in general terms in Australia, people don't talk about finances, or they don't talk about. We don't get taught financial literacy. We don't get taught a lot of these things, and it's amazing as soon as someone finds that conversation and goes, actually, I could do something different, or there is a different approach to this, they actually engage in it. And that's when you can adjust your budgets. That's when you can adjust. Maybe your retirement isn't trips to France. Maybe it is caravanning or whatever it is. You adjust. And for me, it's too hard to quantify our budget. And I'm an accountant, just given the kids and all the things that change in a short window of time. So we try and stick to a percentage of whatever comes in, but we will dip into our offset and our savings fairly regularly. But we try and build our offset account as high as we can during the year. And then in May, tax time, before the end of the year.
See what's left.
See what's left. And Jodie and I will just have a talk. We'll go, is there something we need to do? Is there a holiday we need to go or would like to go on?
Need to go on.
Sometimes it could be a need. With two young kids, yep, that's probably a need now. Or do we put that extra money in a super and let it go and let it do its thing? So, but I think just talking about it is the key thing.
Yeah, and I think people try and put a number, a finite number on things, whereas I've always kind of liked the idea of a min-max. It's I must have this much, because if we don't have this much, then I'm going to get divorced and then I can't eat. And, like bare minimum is camping.
Yeah.
We can do bare minimum camping. Nice to have is wine in France.
Yep.
And that, rather than having an unrealistic goal and then never actually getting there and thinking that we're going to have all this money in retirement and we're going to go on all these great holidays, if we have a good year, then we get to do that. Yep. But I think it's important about setting expectations at one end and go, well, this is the minimum we need in super to be able to do this.
Yeah.
But then if we can have a few wins, or we get some inheritance, or the property market goes well,
those are bonuses.
Yeah, a lot of people live on the dream, I think, rather than the realist.
Yes. And it's surprising that a lot of people can adjust those expectations fairly quickly when you're sub 40. When you're looking at it, when you're over 40, it gets very hard because
run out of time, right?
Yeah, the time frame has to change, and then the runway's so much shorter. So that's probably my biggest thing, is identify your budget and your expectations pre-retirement and post-retirement before you're 40.
I heard a good saying the other day, and it was something like the check comes due at 40, or the bill's
Right.
payable at 40, and it's sort of
The
you know,
bill's
it's-
paid.
it's-
Yeah,
well, it's
no,
like
it's-
you have to have your shit together
Yeah,
by
right.
you're 40,
Yeah, okay.
because you're not able to take the same risks as you once could.
No,
you
because
know,
your runway
business
runs out, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
A little thing called compound interest.
Yeah.
Not everyone's going to turn into Warren Buffett at 90, you know, and then be wealthy when they're 90, you know.
No.
Um,
It is, and 40 is a good area to re-evaluate those expectations of what retirement
yeah,
is.
and I think by 40, most people have decided if they're having kids or not.
Yeah.
Most people should have worked out if they're with their life partner or not, you know, and hopefully things go along, you know, then. But yeah, I think even if people who are 20 can, you know, put some money into super, or you know, or early 20s, you know, it's a bit hard when you're early 20s if you're doing uni and all that
yeah,
sort of
yeah.
stuff. But any kind of win,
Full-time
you
work.
might-
Once
yeah,
you're
yeah,
in
full time work. That's
Full-time
a
work
good way
is
to
a
put it.
good time to
Good
look at,
accountant answer there. Full time employment.
you know, maybe you're not buying 3 cartons that week, you're buying 2. So
Yeah, buy 2.
yeah,
Yeah, it's amazing how $50 a week compounds out over 20 years.
yeah. Well, if you're having 3 cartons a week, you got bigger problems. But,
Yeah. If you're enjoying what you're listening to, feel free to read it in writing at smsfmate.com.au.